My name is Leslie Michel, and I work for the Washington State Department of Agriculture. I worked for the Okanogan Conservation District for about 7 years, and I recently went to work for the Washington State Department of Agriculture back in November of 2019. Started working with the farmers on this Western SARE project back in 2017. We applied for the grant and received it. It came out of another cover crop project that we were working on, and there was a lot of interest in the grazing component because there was success out of the cover crops, and so the farmers really wanted to sort of build on that success and utilize the cover crops for grazing. So we applied for this Western SARE grant and received that, and so we started setting up these trials. So we're standing out here in one of those fields that we did the trial. We harvested this back in end of August of 2019. So how we set this up, this was a 30-acre plot that we did, and we did 4 exclusion zones, and those were about 25 feet by, or I guess they were 45 feet by 100 feet long, and those we used as our control. And so those were wheat-fallow controls, and we would spray those out and treated those as the farmer would normally treat those in a chemical fallow situation. And then we came out and we fenced those out so the cattle would be excluded from those areas. And we did paired plots. So we took those plots and exactly right next to them, we used those plots as paired. So we pulled soil samples from our controls, and right next to them where the cattle had access, we pulled soil samples from both of those. We went out and we pulled above ground biomass, we pulled soil samples, we tested for all sorts of different things like nitrate and ammonium, gravimetric water content, above ground biomass, compaction. We tested at several different depths, 0 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 24, and 24 to 36 inches. So we did a bunch of different testing to see how the different treatments compared to each other. And then we came back the following year and collected yield and grain protein. The farmers did all of the work, basically, from planting the plots, any sprays, terminations, and harvest the following year, and then we helped them weigh those. The farmers all came back with a spring planted crop, and we found that this was really effective. They either planted a spring wheat, spring barley, or spring triticale. And so we worked with 3 different farmers in each year. So a total of 4 different farmers over the course of the 2-year project. So the seed mix that we planted was a warm season cover crop mixture. It had a mixture of sorghum, Sudan grass, millet, sunflowers, turnips, radishes, and spring peas. And we found this to be a pretty effective mixture. It worked well for the livestock. We planted those generally anywhere between the 1st of June and 1st of July. So after risk of last frost, and then those were able to get up and get running once we had some heat units, the ground had warmed up. Farmers usually started grazing about the 1st of August. They got anywhere from 10, depending on how many cows they put on. One farmer put 200 cows on for 3 days. Most of the guys put about 40 cows on for about 10 days. So it really just depended on what worked best for the farmer and how they wanted to manage that. We saw essentially no yield difference between the two different treatments over the course of the 2 years. So that was a really positive thing. The farmers didn't have to apply any more spray applications after they went in and planted it. So we saw a reduction in herbicide treatment. So that was a really positive benefit of having the cover crops out here. Plus they got to utilize the cover crops for grazing, and so they got that additional benefit for the livestock. So some of the challenges that we faced in this project was fencing. I think that was a pretty big one, making sure that the cows stayed out of the areas that we had fenced off. I think what was a pretty effective way to manage the project and get our 4 replicated blocks in each field, but we didn't always, our plots were spread out over a pretty large area, and making sure that those were all running and running well could often be a challenge. Yeah, I think the biggest advice to any producers interested for farmers interested in doing cover crops is really think about your rotation and what you're trying to accomplish. I usually tell producers, what's your management goal and what are you trying to accomplish? And then think about how that'll work in your rotation. You can't take something from somewhere else and just have it work right where you're at. And so you really have to adapt that to your current situation and how you're farming. And so really trying something on a couple of acres or 30 acres, depending on the size of your operation, is really going to be key. Being open-minded and experimenting is super important in trying to adopt some of these new soil health practices that we're trying to do.